Sorry about that. Welcome just to another Brown Girl in America. My name is Nikki Green, your favorite auntie. So, as you can see, I have two new guests and we have a special show for you tonight. So, we are doing the show, and if you've seen the thumbnail, we are focusing on our neighborhood, which is very important to a lot of people: revitalization or gentrification. This is a conversation that has been debating all across St. Louis, but is really honing in on Dutchtown right now. So right now, what I do have is my two guests. And as you can see, and they sent me a bio, so I'm going to read it. So my first guest is Maxi Glamour. They are a multidisciplinary artist, a social theorist, and a dedicated community organizer in St. Louis, as the president and co-founder of Trans Housing Initiative St. Louis and the community person for the Third Ward. Maxi is on the front lines of fighting for system change and housing justice. Welcome, Maxi. Say hi.
Hi.
My second guest and joining the conversation is Nate Lindsay. Nate is a civil litigator, but he is also deeply embedded in the Dutchtown community. He represents Dutchtown Main Streets in his vacancy litigation, provides legal services to businesses investing in the neighborhood, and is a proud Dutchtown resident and parent. Thank you for being here, Nate. So we are going to get right into it, because I'm sure we got a lot of people watching. And let me get the ticker going. And don't forget to like, subscribe to this channel if you want to have real life conversations. You already know I'm just another brown girl in America trying to figure this whole thing out in a chaotic world, okay? So here we go. And we got your comments. If you want to get your comment read up on the screen, you can definitely send us a super chat if you have a question for one of the guests, okay? So let's start with you, Nate. Paint a picture of the Dutchtown you found when you moved here, and what specific problem is your organization solving for?
Oh, wow. Well, Nikki, first, thanks for having Maxi and I here to talk about this. I think we're both excited to have a good discussion that's hopefully informative for our neighbors. I moved to Dutchtown in 2015 and moved in sort of right next to St. Mary's on Grace Avenue. My wife actually already had a house there, and so I had moved in with her, and this was actually in the wake of the Michael Brown killing and all the unrest. And I had just moved to St. Louis to open up a law firm in 2014, and I really didn't know anything about St. Louis other than I was coming over here almost on a weekly basis for court. And so I moved to St. Louis to open up my new law firm, met my wonderful wife, Stacy, and I can remember being in Dutchtown next to St. Mary's, hearing the football game and the band in the background, and then watching live feeds of some of the protests that were going on during that time. And so when we sort of were moving our relationship to the next level, we were looking for where we wanted to root our family for the future. And to me, there is almost no place in America that is like Dutchtown. Dutchtown to me is this dense urban environment that is a wonderful tapestry of all types of different people who are looking for opportunity in St. Louis. And I can't think of any better place to raise a family with the values that we're trying to instill about community, about hard work, about building for something that's bigger than yourself than in Dutchtown.
Okay. And as far as so was it when did you start? Because I know, so when we were talking about the specific problem, when you got here, when did you start seeing an issue that you actually wanted to solve? Or maybe I should say, with the organization, when did you get involved with Dutchtown Main Streets?
Yeah, so I remember in 2015 we were trying to find our neighborhood association, and on Grace Avenue we're sort of in this strange place where it's like one of the last blocks in Dutchtown. And we had reached out to Dutchtown West, and they thought that we were actually in Holly Hills. We weren't in
Mm-hmm.
Holly Hills. And so I met through St. Anthony a guy named John Beitelshees, who was actually the president of downtown Dutchtown around 2015. And that was the organization we chose to get involved with. It was a business association at the time. And at that time, we were really looking at, okay, we're a neighborhood where we don't have a ton of businesses to even be a part of a business association. How do
Right.
we raise funds? And ultimately, that problem, how do you raise funds to create more economic activity and better the community, resulted in what is now a nonprofit economic community-led economic development Main Streets organization called Dutchtown Main Streets. And so
Okay.
my focus has really been on trying to tackle our vacancy so that we can invest in our vacancy to activate it, to have it be occupied by either families or businesses.
Okay. So with that being said, now Maxi, um, Nate describes, because we all can see the neighborhood does have a lot of vacancies, blight. So when you, what picture do you see, and what is the neighborhood and community that you actually fighting to protect? So I guess what I'm asking is, when you look at Dutchtown, based off what Nate is saying, just the business opportunities weren't here. We always know the vacancies, the blight.
Mhm.
What exactly are you trying to protect, or what is it that you see in Dutchtown? How would you want to go about it?
Yeah. So I see a lot of things. I think that each block of Dutchtown is completely different. We have a lot of different people from a lot of different economic backgrounds, a lot of different cultural backgrounds. And to be frank, I live a block in Graveway Park. So when I
Mm-hmm.
when I think about Dutchtown, I actually don't think just about the neighborhood Dutchtown, but I do think about the Dutchtown footprint. Like what are the neighborhoods that are touching it, because people don't just stay in neighborhoods, they go across it. Some of the problems that I see, the people who I'm fighting for in the area, I'm definitely fighting for sex workers, I'm definitely fighting for the unhoused, for trans people. I've been fighting for ecological sustainability and ensuring that immigrants don't have to um, walk and carry the threat of ice. And how that goes is intertwined with housing. I think that a lot of undocumented immigrants, they get missed whenever we're doing information. Whenever we did the census, we could see a lot of people who were poor during the pandemic weren't even opening the doors. And so one of the problems I'm seeing is there's a lack of trust with people in the area. A lot of Black people um, might not trust people who are like white developers at times. They might not see the interests that is aligned with theirs. And a lot of people who are just scared, because the political climate is scary. And so a lot of people are afraid to even just connect. And so when I see Dutchtown, I see a lot of different things, a lot of different fights going on. And I think I try to connect as much as possible. And yeah, I don't know if I
Okay,
answered the second part.
you did. So let's talk about the word revitalization. When
Mhm.
you hear that, what do you hear when you hear revitalization when it pertains to Dutchtown and the conversation we have now? So when you hear that, what comes up for you?
Yeah.
Does
So
it?
I'm so my formal study right now. I'm a philosopher who focuses on language. So I look at
Mm-hmm.
language in maybe a different way than some people do. But I literally think that the word vitalization, you know, vitally, vitality means life, and means bringing back to life. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I think quite literally, to me, revitalization is just bringing something back to life, giving it nourishment.
Okay. And so, and I think we all agree, because I was going to ask you, Nate, about the word gentrification, but we all know what gentrification means. I feel like we all want everything the same. We just want to make sure nobody gets displaced. So I'm thinking that the real debate is not um, revitalization, it's the displacement. So I know that, and I'm gonna jump around here a little bit because you mentioned some. So the organization and the partners like Lutheran Development Group, they emphasize that you build an affordable housing. So we can talk about affording. So I'm assuming we can all agree gentrification is bad. We want the neighborhood to be amazing, but we don't want people to be displaced. We can all agree on that, correct? So, not just luxury condos, but I know that it's the buzz on the street. The buzz on the street is basically they're building up everything. Developers are coming in, and people are scared that they're going to be pushed out. They're scared that the rents, not even just the rents, I guess with the wealthy people, they're scared corporations are going to come in and buy out everything, or art galleries. I've heard, that art galleries popping up, boutiques popping up. And I think some people are wondering where they fit into that. I know that Lutheran Development Group and St. Joseph Housing Initiative are working on that. But can you explain to the listeners exactly how they are working to prevent outside big companies from displacing people who've been here for years, like myself?
Yeah, I think maybe like one place to start is really talking about what we do agree on, right? And I think like at the most base level, you said displacement, and that is what we're talking about, right? When I think about how we measure gentrification, right? I'll throw them under the bus, but I always think about the Shaw neighborhood because I can look at a metric of loss of black population from 20 from 2000 to 2020, and I can see that they lost 5,000 black residents at that time, and I can see that their average income skyrocketed during that time. Right? We know people in our neighborhood that left Shaw because Shaw became expensive and are now living in Dutchtown. Oh, so Maxie, you're pointing at yourself. I would love for you to chime in here on your thoughts on sort of just that, if you want.
Yeah, I think, we saw with urban renewal, people coming back from the county. We saw white flight. We saw people being like, nah, I don't want to stay next to black people. I want to go to the suburbs and have my own driveway and be in my own white neighborhood. And then those kids were like, actually, we want culture. We're going to come back to the city. And then they were targeting safer areas that were closer to other white people and still in the heart of culture. And so they targeted, Shaw neighborhood because Tower Grove is cool and it's hip. And so we saw about 20 years ago people moving there. In about 2009, I left from Shaw, 39th Botanical, and moved further south. And so I think kind of what we're seeing, what I think what people are looking at is this prognosis that we see people moving south and property values increasing going south. And so I think that's kind of like the potentiality being actualized. And I think that's where we're at. It's like, what is this precipice of actualization and what preventative measures are we needing to implement so that, there are great parts about Botanical Heights. There are great parts about all neighborhoods. Yet how do we ensure that we make green spaces, art galleries, and like cultural institutions and revitalization that don't focus purely on bringing people from the suburbs, but the people that live here and have lived here for a long time can thrive and enjoy the benefits of revitalization.
Okay,
Yeah.
so go ahead, Dave.
Well, and I was going to say, so like I think the threat is real, right? And so a big part of the conversation in Dutchtown right now, we can say, hey, we're not Shaw. Our black population is growing, and I love pointing to the fact that anecdotally, I believe we're probably generating more Black homeowners in the Dutchtown area than just about any other neighborhood in the city. But that doesn't mean that we don't need to make decisions that protect us from becoming the next Shaw, right? And I think that that's really what we're talking about, because one sign of the threat of gentrification is sort of this rapid increase in investment, right? Rapid increase in investment that people who are currently in the neighborhood who may not have the capital and means can't access at the same time. And I think that understandably, there are people in Dutchtown right now that feel like they're seeing that. I think that the good news for those folks is that the majority of building permits are coming from our community development corporation partners that are building housing that has affordability uh, as a restriction for the units that are going to be available. So when we're talking about Lutheran Development Group and the new houses that it's building that are limited to 80% area median income buyers, or St. Joseph's houses that are limited to 80% area median income buyers, or then we get deeper into affordability and we're talking about DeSales Virginia Plaza project that not only is going to have some 30% area median income multi-room units and 60% area median income multi-room units, but also some wraparound services for the folks that are renting there, and hopefully, fingers crossed, a nonprofit grocery store that's going to be right there, on a bus line, and so you're sort of seeing two things happen at the same time. You're seeing rapid investment, and I hope I'm not being naive, because what I'd like to think is that this is the first time in St. Louis where maybe we've done investment right, because we're starting with affordability for residents as the baseline, as opposed to, I think, what Maxi was pointing out, where neighborhoods are being built for outsiders coming in and looking to invest.
Right. So let's talk about affordability, because that's affordability in the AMI is a tricky word, and for the listeners, but it's affordable from whom? Because if we're talking about, is it based on the area of median income, which is as a whole, which includes richer counties, Ladue, Clayton, or is it based off the area median income in Dutchtown, which I believe is probably about what, $30,000 or something?
Right.
Like the people that live over here.
This is one of the hard parts about the conversation, is that you have a spectrum of affordability, as well as a very personal look at what affordability might mean. What the government does is it takes a family of four and it says, okay, that hypothetical family of four at 100% of the area median income, which is for the entire metro area, right, is going to be a set number. And then it's going to have programs where it might incentivize a Lutheran Development Group or a DeSales to build housing and say, okay, this housing is only for people that are at 80% of that income level, or only for people that are at 60%. And then what's even sort of more complicated is that you get a credit for being a family that's bigger than four, right? So you could make more money and still get into that housing if you were a family of 6 or 7, because it costs more to have a larger family. But if you're just a single person, it's actually a credit against you, and you have to make less money in order to have access to that sort of rent capped opportunity for affordable housing. And so the best way to sort of look at these limits is if you just Google, I would say, St. Louis CDBG area median income. They'll give you a table and it'll show you, 30, 50, 60, and 80% based on family size from 1 to 8.
Okay. Okay. Is that your background?
It is. They're still having a board meeting behind me.
Okay.
Doing the work. We're doing the work.
All right. So let's kind of move right along. So because I think we touched a few things, but I did want to go ahead and ask you, Nate, and we just gonna jump right into it. How do you respond to the claim that you're just cleaning up, quote unquote, the neighborhood for wealthier residents, whiter residents to be exact?
Yeah, well, one, I think that it's difficult for me to not get defensive about that. Just being very honest with you guys, and I
Mm-hmm.
know you both sort of know me on a personal level, but I spend a lot of time trying to secure affordable housing for the Dutchtown neighborhood. Uh, what I try to remember, which I think is a totally fair uh, understanding, is that St. Louis doesn't have a good history of people like me advocating for neighborhoods like Dutchtown, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so anybody that is suspicious of someone that's sort of as a busybody as I am and as involved in doing some of this work, I think it's a fair suspicion. And so I hope that one of the reasons why I was excited to have this conversation was to sort of get more factual information out there about what Dutchtown Main Streets does, what some of our CDC partners are doing, and really what I think is the community ethos that makes me love Dutchtown and the South Side, because I think that this isn't happening. We're not doing it correctly by accident. If it was
Mm-hmm.
happenstance, we'd look a lot more like Shaw because the threat level is there. But we have amazing community organizers who I don't think are going to let that happen in our neighborhood. I like to think that I'm one of them. I know that Maxi is one of them. I know all of the Dutchtown Main Streets board is. We have a lot of pride in what Dutchtown looks like right now. And I don't need it to change a whole lot. But I certainly do think that every single one of my neighbors, no matter how much money they make, deserves to have nice parks, nice streets, not live next to a vacancy, and a place to go get coffee if they so desire. So,
All right. So, based off of what Nate said, I do have a follow up question for you because this is important too, Maxie. So, Nate is actively revitalizing, sowing slumlords, and I wanted to say that because somebody actually asked this question. She wanted to hear, and I'll actually get you all questions if you all want and have time as people actually ask some questions in the comments. Um, but groups they removing vacant buildings that are magnets. We know for crime. We love our historic buildings and the architecture. So what would be the alternative? And if we don't have this kind of investment in the community, then what happens to Dutchtown? Like, do we continue to decline, or like, how would this look in your view? Restoration without displacement.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think some of the practices that we're having, with Thistle, that we have to be mindful about is we get people who are unhoused and get them to like buying houses. And we're specifically looking at trans and gender nonconforming people, and seeing the particular ways that it's hard for them to navigate the housing sector. And so as we are working with them, we have to be cognizant that when we're looking at gentrification, a lot of times it is queer artists that are coming into the neighborhood, and they are often, the first signs of gentrification. I think that there's like poster child gentrification is like white artists from the suburbs moving into like low income Black and brown neighborhoods, and so I think, what methodologies are we trying to be proactive about is like how are we making sure that we are connecting and building community and ensuring that we are not just putting people into houses, but they are active parts of the community that we are following up and seeing how they can get connected. I really, when you asked me to do this, I was like, I really think that DSCC would be really great, Dutchtown South Community Corporation, as well on this, because I think that they also have like another housing model. My focus is housing first model. I think we put it in the a thing to talk about, but I think that when we prioritize housing people, I think that is necessary for the first step. And I think that what Nate is doing is really ensuring that these houses that have been dilapidated um, are being housed. They're vessels for people to live in. Because I think the problem is that we have a lot of people who don't have houses, and so I think it's a priority. And so I think maybe what I'm trying to say here is that there is this false dichotomy that's being kind of presented, that revitalization can't be like economically conscious of looking at like wealth inequalities when you're doing things and ensuring that there's no displacement. So I guess I would just say, like, I think that they're pretty much doing a good job alongside other people, listening to community partners. They invite me to board meetings. I get to go and like chat with them. So I feel like if I had a big problem, we wouldn't have a good relationship.
Right. Okay. So what is it that, so you're not saying that it's bad. You're just worried about what's to come.
I think,
Because
yeah.
based off what Nate's saying, he has things in place. They have things in place to protect us from that. Now, I will not say, and it's just an anecdotal experience of my own, that my rent has went up like 3 times this year. And that's just me being honest and transparent. So I get both sides, but I also love what I'm seeing. So, and I think a lot of people feel like that. I think they just want to feel secure. So let's talk about the elderly. So Nate, are there any, were you going to say something? I'm sorry.
Yeah. I wanted to add to that. I think one thing that, it's kind of missing from the conversation is, like, while Nate and the main streets, they might be really attentive about ensuring that they're not gentrifying. We can see that there are other developers, moving into the area. And so, like, we can see Chippewa is art gallery, art gallery. We see white suburban kids coming in to Chippewa for these like releases of these new spaces. And so I think one of the things is how do we control others as well? Because, like, Nate and I are on the same page, and I think maybe other developers are on paper on the same page, but I think how do we put policy down? Like Mamdani is trying to do rent control in New York City. How do we make sure that we don't have rising rent every year and people's mortgages become unaffordable and people on fixed income don't get pushed out of their house because development happens and it's raising taxes? And I think that
So
kind of
would that, I'm sorry, because I don't want to miss this, because I want to talk about the reasoning, the rent. So would the development, I'm asking you this, Maxi or Nate, whoever, that would cause the insurance rates to rise. Is that correct or no? Am I off on that?
Insurance rates are always like really, really difficult to understand. Like, they're going up everywhere for everybody right now. I think taxes is one where sort of you have this direct correlation of, okay, if there are less vacancies in a neighborhood, the value of property is going up, and that means taxes are going up. And there's some good evidence that the city of St. Louis may have sort of like forgotten to pace taxes and increases, specifically on the south side and in our neighborhood, until they gouged everybody this past year, and there was a shock to the system for people's taxes going up 60, 80, 100% because they hadn't been raised in quite some time. And so that does get into, I think, Nikki, what you were just about to talk about is like our longer term residents who may be older, who are on fixed incomes. And that, in my opinion, we have the senior tax freeze. We have to have more things like that, have them readily available to protect those folks, because there isn't really another option other than government intervention to protect them from those rising values and rising taxes. I'm a big
You
fan
said
of even. Oh, go ahead, Nikki.
no. You said government intervention is the only way. So you're saying more
Yeah,
government?
because you have retirees, right? Folks who aren't working anymore, who are sort of on a fixed income, and they may have been in this neighborhood for a really long time and had maybe their house is even paid off, but all of a sudden they've got twice as much tax liability compared to what they had last year, and now they're missing $1,500, that year when they were on a set income. And so, yeah, I think that freezing taxes specifically for the elderly, but I also think that there's room for circuit breaker. They call these circuit breaker taxes, where like if you get so high, they stop it, right? I think there's room for that when you see rapid growth in real estate taxes for people who have been in the neighborhood a long time, regardless of how old they are. Because I
Okay.
think that adds protection for people who deserve the benefits of the change that they're seeing in the neighborhood without the threat of being displaced.
Okay. I'm sorry, I was reading a question that was directed at you. I'm going to get to all questions, but while you're waiting, don't forget to hit the like and the subscribe button. Like I say, if you want real conversations, real talk, we just regular people out here trying to figure this thing out. So I like what I'm seeing. That's just me personally, but I would be remiss to act like I'm not worried, of course, about the elderly or people like myself, because I don't want to leave. I love my neighborhood, but I also understand the value of what's happening. So I think, me personally, we should focus on the elderly. I do think long-term residents, but I think that should be case by case contingent, but that's just me. So if investment is blocked, because if it's a block, everything continue to crumble, it's going to be bad for the community and crime and everything anyway, right, Maxi?
Yeah, you can definitely see that like illegal dumping happens in places where people, they're dilapidated neighborhoods. We can see, squatters come in, and one of the things about squatters that it's kind of one of my most controversial opinions, maybe not my most, is that a lot of people are complaining about squatters and their properties that they're holding on to. People have they have 5 or 6 like houses, and they're not doing anything with them, and the squatters are getting in there, and then people are getting mad at the squatters. But why aren't you getting mad at the person that's just hoarding houses in a place where we have a housing crisis? And so I think, yeah, filling these houses, making things revitalized, and housing the people is going to combat crime.
Yeah. Well, I think there's enough
100% agree with
accountability.
that. Oh, sorry. I was going to say 100% agree with Maxi there. I experienced this a lot with the vacancy litigation. And when you're talking about getting to the root of the problem, nobody wants the house next to them to burn down because of a faulty heater that someone who's unhoused is using and running electricity through another house or something like that. But most of the time, the person who can stop that is some libertarian property owner from California who has not invested because he's waiting for us to do the work and then turn around and sell the property at a profit. And so that's what the vacancy litigation tries to do. We only go after vacant properties, and we're trying to hold the people who sort of have the keys to success accountable so that we can invest in those properties with people who really care about the neighborhood.
Okay. I can dig that. I do have something that I have been driving around. Let me find my phone. I think it fell. I didn't load it on my computer, but I'm going to get it because and I just want to know if you all know anything about these. Let me go. So I have been, and you let me know if you can't see it, and then I'll upload it and show it on screen. But I've been seeing these pop up everywhere. Is that us?
Yeah, so I believe that is Lutheran Development Group's sign for the properties that they're working on. And one of the reasons those go up, it usually says like property maintained by owner or something like that, has a lot to do with just alerting the city to the fact that this may be a vacancy, but it's held by somebody who has an active plan for it. I think one of the things that is difficult is that in order to provide affordable housing, you often need a government program that helps subsidize the cost to build it or to hold the rents at a lower rate. And
Mm-hmm.
those programs are notoriously complicated and take a long time. So if Lutheran Development Group's sort of project for Marquette Homes is a perfect example of this, where I think they originally put in for their low income housing tax credit application like 7 years ago, and it took that long to finally get it approved. And that whole time, unfortunately, they have to be able to tell the state, we're ready to go and build on these properties that we have control over. We're just waiting for you to give us the nod to get moving. And if the state is slow, or if the state rejects them the first time or the second time or the third time, we can unfortunately see longer holding times in order to get that affordable housing. This is something that Dutchtown Main Streets has to talk about with the vacancy litigation, because we may have a house that comes up where we've taken it away from a bad landlord, and we have to make a choice. Do we give it to a nonprofit where it may take 3 years to turn it into affordable housing, or do we offer it up to somebody who says that they can immediately renovate it, but it's going to be renovated at market rates? And so it's sort of like trying to balance, those two interests of the timeline and the affordability. I think one thing that I can say that people should know is that you won't ever hear me say we've got too much affordable housing in Dutchtown. That will not ever come out of my mouth. And in fact, one of the ways that I think we continue to succeed in Dutchtown is by having more supply of affordable housing than we actually need, because that gives our neighbors opportunity. If our neighbors aren't having to fight over those affordable housing opportunities and everyone can have one that needs one, that means they have the ability to save, to go shop at our local small businesses, buy a record, buy from Tacos La Jefa, things like that. That's good for our economy when our supply is high.
If you, and this is just something that actually popped up in my head, because believe me, affordable housing is needed. But I do think that everything should have something in place. So we talking about a lot of affordable housing. Now we're talking about mixing all income levels in. Amazing. Would there, or could there even legally be, I'm not even sure, a mandate to where you have landlords screen their residents properly and effectively, so we won't continue to see the same problems with sort of the same type of issues? If that makes sense. Did I say it right?
I'm going to give Maxi the first shot, and then I'm happy to respond.
Yeah, I think that we also, like what happens to people that don't pass the screening, right? Like what happens to someone who doesn't meet those calibers? I always working through like a housing first model. How do we ensure that we get as many people off of the streets as possible? And so how can we make the barrier for entry kind of low as possible? For me, that's what affordability looks like. What do we do with people who don't have no money at all?
Well, I'm not even actually, and I should have said that. I'm not even thinking of a financial. I'm not thinking credit. I'm not even thinking credit screening. I'm just saying, because I used to be a property manager.
Mm-hmm.
So me thinking of how I would screen people, not necessarily. I did Section 8, I did LIHTC, I did the affordable housing thing, but I did make sure that I vetted my residents properly, or future tenants, as much as I can, by calling previous landlords, trying to see why did they get evicted. Did they tear up the house? Did they have a bunch of chaos? So those type of things are what I'm saying as far as more vetting, not as far as credit. People pay their house before they pay their car note. I'm not worried about it. I understand things like that. I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about, I guess, basic, just a social fit. Like, I know that sounds a little bit harsh to some people, but it's a reality because I live on the corner where I live and I see it all the time. But I also see another landlord that has a high turnover. He's had like 6 tenants of the same type since I've been here, and it is not pretty. So I'm not even thinking he's doing any vetting, or she. I don't know if it's a man or woman. So
Or
that's
this
things I'm thinking about, and that's a longer conversation. That was just something I kind of threw out there.
I think there also could be a reason, like why do people who, you know, we can see a correlation between like chaotic behavior and like wealth inequality about like, you know, cognitive developmental issues. And so like, what are the causal links of a landlord perpetually having bad tenants? Is it that they have roaches, that they got rats, that they are, you know, that the bills are so high because it hasn't been updated with weathering?
Mm-hmm.
What are the components of the landlord, you know, like, and I think when we're looking at the screening, I think we also have to, you know, it's the discrepancy of the landlord themselves, right? Because some landlords, they're like, okay, you've got a record, you know, I see you, you're in a tight fix, you know, I need to make this acceptable to you because like I trust you. And I think that there needs to be a trust that goes both ways. And I think a lot of
Mm-hmm.
times we put that focus and the trust on, you know, the tenant needs to be the one that is implementing and showing the trust. But I really think the housing issue is because we don't have landlords that are trustful, trustworthy. And so I always think about the causal implications of like negative like components. Like, is it all just on the renter? And often we can see it's the landlord. Slumlords always getting bad tenants because they got roaches. They got the landlord special where they paint over the light switch, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely a thing, which brings me to a question somebody asked. We hitting 8:57, so if you guys want to take a few minutes to ask some of the residents questions, I think we answered and covered most of them, but somebody did. I think this was her. So Emma Burrows would love to hear both opinions. How do we manage out of town slumlords who take advantage of local tenants and families? And because I was going to say you addressed it because Nate, we actively sues those slumlords, and yay for Nate for that. But so she's talking about, and I think I was going to ask that too. Tenants and families, if we talk about slumlords, is this something legally you can do to make them do right or leave or sell with an act of, you know what I mean? If they're actively collecting rent, tenants in there, things like that.
Maxi, can I take this one? So this is a passion project of mine, but the number one way that we can solve bad landlord behavior is with better, stronger enforcement from the city of St. Louis. And the city of St. Louis has basically abrogated its responsibility regarding bad landlords in this city. We know that we have a bad landlord problem. We know that we have a vacancy problem, and our building division setup and our building division's funding does not reflect the need that will protect those tenants who are being taken advantage of, and the city as a whole that's being taken advantage of by out of town speculators and people trying to make a quick buck on our community. So
Yeah.
yell at your alder, yell at your mayor, your comptroller, and your board president, because they have the ability to fix this problem and they need to fix it.
Yeah, and I think I definitely think that everyone, because everybody's always so focused on like the federal, even myself, we have got to get more focused and knowledgeable about the local issues and politics and knowing how who's working what. Because even and it was so funny and I felt so silly because I knew this and I actually believe Shane told me this before, but it's not in this neighborhood. But it's a stop sign been down. If you get off on Madison and make that right into those, I think there's some apartments, Bissell. There's some apartments over there in Midtown. That stop sign has been down since the beginning of the summer, and it's still not there. So, I mean, people can have an accident. I've seen somebody ride right through it that's not from there. I only stopped there because I know it used to be there. So things like that, we have got to get involved, people. I have Blackberry puppets. Did I say that right? Yes, Blackberry puppets. I lived in the Shaw during the time period Nate mentioned. LAGO, I'm not sure. That's an acronym. Skyrocketing rents displace many low income and Black residents. What is the answer? Rent control has been effective in other big cities.
Yeah.
So I guess
when we're talking about affordable housing, we are talking about rent control, right? We're talking about setting rents at levels where people can afford them based on not spending more than 30% of their income on housing. And so when I was talking about supply and starting with affordable housing first, that's how we keep ourselves from becoming Shaw. We find the partners who are willing to build that affordable housing. And again, this is where I think we have good news in Dutchtown. Dutchtown Main Streets keeps track of this with our partners, and on our sort of greater footprint, we have 182 affordable rent-controlled units in the pipeline in Dutchtown coming online within the next year and a half. 65 of those are at least 3-bedroom, and I think that's number one in the city. I would challenge any other neighborhood to say that they're doing a better job of creating an affordable housing pipeline than Dutchtown. And so that's why, like I said, you'll never hear me say we have too much affordable housing, because a high supply of affordable housing is good for Dutchtown.
it is. I can't hate on that. I have another one from Blackberry Puppets, and I think you addressed this sort of. How do we stop super rich out of state corporate real estate investors from buying up the housing in Dutchtown? So Nate, you're suing the already FACOs, and just to reiterate, if you already asked, what are you doing to stop them from buying up everything? Now, I'm not necessarily against like some, but they got to be well intended, of course.
Yeah, so the vacancy lawsuits is one way, but I actually think that Maxi is probably closer to the other way. So I'm kind of trying to act as the shield to, or I guess perhaps the sword is better because they're already here and I'm trying to bat them away. But I think some of the work that Maxi is doing, trying to get people better prepared to purchase their own homes, is the other side of that equation. We have to kind of do both at the same time. So Maxi, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about some of those efforts that help us be competitive in getting some of these houses.
Yeah, I think that we just have to recognize the historical components of like owning houses and the redlining and like what neighborhoods didn't allow Black people. We saw the history of Dutchtown did not let Black people in it. That Dutchtown was a white-only German neighborhood. And when we're looking at poor people, we're looking at Black people, we're looking at trans people. I think it's necessary for them to understand how to navigate the system that wasn't made for them. It was made for someone else to have power over them. And so I think what is necessary is to alleviate that burden of entry for people and ensure that they're well equipped, make sure that they know, they have all these grants and all these first home buyer loans and all these things that people don't even know about. They don't even think it's possible. And so I think what I try to instill in people is radical possibility, radical imagination, and ensure that they know that they can do something to hold a better future for themselves. And I think that being that liaison to those systems is really a joy. And I really like being a sword.
Okay. So we got warriors on each side, right? And we just need the community to stay strong, have faith. So what is so? I mean, I guess there's not a worry. There is a worry from Maxi, but is there anything now that we've had this conversation, Maxi, um, like, or anybody in the comments, answer in the comments, this conversation make you feel more at ease? Because I think that's more of what we were trying to accomplish to make, because I think you guys pretty much laid it out. Nate's fighting the vacancies. We can't fight everybody at one time, but I did want the people to understand that I don't believe that we have a big bad wolf in Dutchtown. Anywhere. I think that we are well intended. Uh, so, but I did want the people of Dutchtown to know and feel at ease. So, Maxie, do you think this conversation will make the residents feel at ease? And I know you brought up too also, and you talked about the affordable housing, but you brought up NOAA, and I actually had never heard of this acronym before. It was in you guys' email. I don't know who brought it up. Naturally occurring affordable housing. So we talked about the affordable rent, but then you saying energy burdens. Yeah. So, but you talked about the windows. So I guess I'm bringing it up because I want the listeners to know what NOAH is. NOAH, an acronym for a naturally affordable housing. But this isn't really that good, right? If they're not building, is that what you're saying? I'm getting out of Maxi. I'm asking.
Nate wrote that.
Nate wrote the NOAH. Okay.
Yeah.
It didn't say. It was just like bullet points.
These are some of the things that we sort of talk about where the dichotomy doesn't really work, right? Good or bad. Because affordable housing, I think we can all agree, okay, that's good. We want people to be housed. What's the quality of the housing, though? And a lot of times, I think, as Maxie was just kind of alluding to, Dutchtown and its structures and its systems were built to extract wealth out of a certain type of people. And we had naturally occurring affordable housing because that's what was happening. So rents can be very, very low if you are not putting any money at all back into the property that you're renting out, and you're constantly evicting anybody who may be just a couple days late on their rents. That can be a bad thing. It can also be a good thing, though, and that's kind of what I'm trying to get at with increasing our supply of affordable housing. Because if all of the sudden next year there's 100 one-bedroom units in Dutchtown that are all set at, say, $750 a month, just being hypothetical here, that probably means that those landlords who were getting increased prices that maybe felt unaffordable, like over $1,000, things like that, they're going to have to compete with that affordable housing now, right? And so their number is going to have to get closer to the median to compete with the new supply of housing, affordable housing that we have in Dutchtown. And so that's also naturally occurring, but because we've generated a competing affordable housing supply. So it's neither good or bad. It depends on the characteristics of that housing. We want it to be healthy housing for folks. We want it to be accessible for folks. But it is something that we should be considering and thinking about when we're talking about the development of affordable housing.
I think that, and it's just me being an observer. So you basically saying it's kind of a balance. It's almost like we're forcing you to have to compete and keep your houses together. Because I've been seeing a lot of people update their apartments too. So I've been just seeing a lot of people work, build wood everywhere around, all over the place. Something is going on. So it's a good thing. But like I said, I know some people get worried, and I'm glad we know who those signs are. I think a number or somewhat, just like because it kind of made me nervous. But since I know what's going on a little bit as far as, the work that's being done, I just thought I'd ask. But I always feel like if I'm thinking about it, other people might be thinking about it. And then Maxie, you have mentioned, and I know we talked about the white suburban kids or the old residents moving in, and is that what we're calling like urban renewal? So what is your fear, or if any, of, because some people might look at it as just they kids want to come back to the city and where they're from. So is it anything that I might be missing or listeners might be missing that worries you about that specifically?
Yeah, I think we can see a perfect example of urban renewal, how it happens and how it changes the income of the residents of the area. When we look at I guess Lafayette Park, Lafayette Square, like they spent a lot of money in that, and now those houses are a lot of money, and it's people of lower income aren't around there any longer, and so
Well, I grew up in Lafayette Square, so I kind of know. So it's always been huge houses, but we had one little 4-family flat sitting like in the middle of all those big old houses. So to me, Lafayette Square was always rich. That's just how I
yeah.
looked at it.
We see that the richness definitely was exponentially changed after so much renewal was going to the area. I think the thing is that when people are coming in from richer areas, they have more like a disposable income, and so that they can raise the prices of things. We see this in like Mexico City right now because so many tourists are coming in and getting Airbnbs and like being able to buy avocado toast for $20 that the people who are living there can no longer afford it. So we're seeing the economic base being set by people who aren't from that economic base. We see a shift where affordability isn't tangible for not just housing, but like bagels or restaurants. And I think that's why there are components of like, veganism or like environmental things or like kitschy art stuff within neighborhoods as like signifiers of potential gentrification, because people who have disposable income, they first target those things to like grasp onto culture, because often they're coming from places where there's less culture than in concentrated urban areas.
Right. And I know your work at the Trans Housing Initiative, you mentioned the barriers for trans individuals, modern day redlining, but you also said that a majority of this are queer. Well, you said queer white. Am I quoting you correctly?
Okay. Sorry, they're trying to kick me out.
I'm
Repeat
sorry.
that
Okay.
question one more time.
This could be the last question, then we can do the outro. So the work at the Trans Housing Initiative, I know you were saying that it's like a modern day red line and they are having issues, barriers to capital. But you also mentioned that most of the people that are moving over here, you said it was a trend that it would be like queer. Now, don't see if I quote you wrong, queer individuals, queer white individuals moving in. What are you saying, the trans community alone, or are you saying the LGBT community as a whole? Because you mentioned the queer, that's the only reason I'm bringing it up. You were saying that that's a sign that we're being gentrified because of the white queer community.
Yeah. I think we can see in like urban development, a lot of times the white gays are often, and the artists are the first people to move into low income areas. It's the first sign of gentrification.
So and it's just for my listeners, and I'm a C student. We're separating the queer from trans.
Queer is
Just so I can make sure.
and it just means anyone that is like of any gender or sexual minority. So like trans, queer, LGBT. I just use it as a more encompassing term because it's more of a word, and LGBT is more of an acronym.
So, okay, that's what I want to make sure of. So you said that they're having barriers to capital on the Trans Housing Initiative. So because I guess I want to just be clear, are they being discriminated against? Like, how are you seeing this happening? Is it because of transitioning and names? Like, please explain to me, because I am so dumb on this.
Yeah,
So
no, I think this is definitely
don't make me talk anymore.
This is definitely an hour-long course that I could do. That is my main focus, really looking at like queer advocacy in the area. And so when we're looking at the barriers for trans and gender nonconforming people when it comes to the housing sector, people who have different IDs, right? You get your ID changed. Not everyone knows that if you get your driver's license changed and you're trans, you have to also get your birth certificate changed. And if you're from a different state, the way in which you're changing your birth certificate, changing particular documents is being shifted quite frequently. We can also see that trans people have a higher rate of being unhoused than cis people, because a lot of times parents kick them out at a young age because they are trans or they're queer, and due to religiosity, due to like intolerance, they no longer let them stay their house. We also can see that trans people and queer people who do not fit the gender norm have a lower rate of being housed. They also have higher rate of being, subjected to depression, anxiety, PTSD due to homophobia and transphobia. And so all of these come together. We have these people who are traumatized, who are vilified, and they're ostracized and marginalized, and they have problems before they get into the housing sector, and the housing sector just exasperates them drastically.
And I know you have to go, but Nate, to that, is there anything specifically to that is, or are we just basically trying to make sure we vet people and
what I appreciate
they don't
most
discriminate?
about Maxi is leading with that trust and that relational aspect. And it's something that I hope that I also model, because when we can all sort of talk with each other and trust each other to bring each other up within Dutchtown, we get better results against these threats that are real, structural, and difficult, like Maxi was just talking about. And so, Nikki, thank you for having us both on here to talk about that, to hopefully build some trust. And I know this is Dutchtown, so we're gonna keep doing it. So
yeah, always. Thank you both. Thank you both for y'all coming on my show. For one, I appreciate it. I was a little nervous. This was my biggest interview yet because it's close to home. I love Dutchtown, and I wanted to make sure I handled this with care, and then I wanted to be informative. So the line between progress and displacement is thin. We know that, but I think we got it. I think we got some soldiers. I'm gonna give you both 10 seconds to say what you think or anything else, and then we can close out.
Protect sex workers, stop ICE, protect trans people, feed the unhoused, and stop judging people.
I will go with get outside, meet your neighbors. It's the number one best thing that you can do to understand why Dutchtown is an incredible neighborhood. Second thing, fund the building division. And third thing, if you see those vacancies owned by out-of-state speculators, please file your CSB reports. Let me know about that address so that I can go after it.
All right. And with that being said, guys, thank you for showing up. Don't forget, hit the like and subscribe. You can still drop your comments. I will upload this so you can replay it, rewatch it. It'll be clipped up and all sorts of good things. But I'm just another brown girl in America trying to figure this thing out. Bye.